Hi, you're listening to the My Body, My Story podcast.
But happy is important. Like if you're not happy and you've got a big house and a car and a not very nice husband or partner, like what's the point?
This is the 45 over 45 chapter where we celebrate rule breakers and role models, the women who inspire us to live life our way and to show their sensuality, beauty, soul, and true essence. I'm your host, Alina, and I'm interviewing 45 women over the age of 45 while they're sitting in my makeup chair and getting their makeover for the project's photo shoot. Here we talk about what it's like to be 45 plus, adjusting to the changes that come with time, and we'll listen to the stories of our participants. If you have an interesting story to share, we'd love for you to participate. You can email us on info@alexandrawalker.com, and that's Alexandra spelled with a KS, or visit our website alexandrawalker.com.
What stands out the most, maybe?
So,
It doesn't have to be long ago or...
no, that's right.
anything.
Well, I suppose the thing that attracted me about your project was your rule breakers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm definitely not intentionally a rebel or a rule breaker, but I seem to have broken a few rules in my life, like leaving home at 12 and left school before I turned 14, so I was 13.
You're a wild child.
Went out and had a full-time job. Supported myself. I mean, my mother did help me a bit with my rent. I lived in communes for years. I was pretty sort of devastated when my parents split up. I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I lived with my mother. And we did end up living in a few communes. So I moved to a commune when I was 8 years old in Paddington.
Wow.
And I suppose I just became worldly, I think, in
Very quickly.
like I've...
Had to grow up.
That's right, I had to grow up. You know, I realised quite young that no one's going to rescue you from yourself. You have to do everything. Well, you're born alone, really.
Yeah.
I think living in communes and villages is a good concept because you always have the support you need from others, but it didn't quite turn out that way for me. And that's why I ended up moving out, because people were just too busy on their own journey, really.
Yeah.
One minute they wanted me to have responsibilities like an adult, and the next minute they wanted to treat me as a child. So I wasn't happy with that.
No.
So moved out, moved into another commune, sort of drifted around the city in a few different communes for a few years until I ended up back where I grew up, which is Avalon. And I did move, before I left home, I did move back with my father, and we moved to this isolated place called Bungle.
Is that in Victoria as well?
No, it's in New South Wales. It's on the mid-north coast.
Right.
Beautiful spot, heaps of lakes and beaches. And but no culture.
Wow.
And I think I stayed 6 months, and
That's it.
I came back. That's when I moved back with my mother, and then moved out of home. And probably should have been dead a few times over with situations that happened to me.
Wow. You've had quite a tough life.
And then I ended up, when I was 15, I moved back to where I grew up in Avalon because my sister had moved down when she left school at 16, and I sort of reconnected with some of my friends, and that's where I met my first partner. So I was in a relationship from 15 to 22.
Wow.
And I did end up back in Bungle, of all places. I stopped in on the way back from Queensland and ended up staying and just lived in this tiny little bubble caravan on the lake edge. And it was probably the first time since I left home that I didn't work for a couple of years. I think I was just on the dole, and there's a few other people living around in tents, and we used to sit by the fire and play guitar and
that's
smoke
awesome.
a bit of weed and live in the bush.
Yeah.
And it was all pretty perfect.
Yeah.
But, you know, as
Wow.
some men do, I got hurt and that relationship ended.
Yeah.
And I ended up being with my stepbrother, which is also breaking a rule, I suppose.
Well,
It's not really, but
it's not,
in some people's eyes, I'm probably referred to as a bit of a maverick, which is unconventional or untraditional.
Hey, the royals used to marry their
That's
first
right.
cousins, like, come on.
We'd never really lived together as brother and sister. I think we did for about 6 months, and he went to England,
It's
and
not
we'd
like
always
kids
got on
together,
really well, and
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of anxiety around it, like telling our parents, like his mum and my dad, and they were really supportive. They just sort of said, well, you can have the child that we never had, and that sort of, which we did. We had 2 children, and he had a daughter from a previous relationship. And we were pretty much madly in love for 17 years till
17 years, wow.
till he burnt me as well. So
Until what? He left?
well, you know, he
17 years.
he was having an affair with someone else, and
You need to write a book about your life.
yeah, it's
You
just
really
skimming the surface. Anyway, like since then, I've lived on my own, which is like 19 years, because I didn't really have trust issues. I just didn't want to settle for anything less than what I, deserved or needed or wanted.
Right. You've learned. You've been with everyone. You've like people that you loved, and they hurt you. So from then on, you had to focus on yourself.
Well, for 2.5 years, I didn't go near a man or have sex or anything, and then sort of a local man fell in my lap, and it just sort of happened.
Yeah.
I was with him for 2.5 years, and it was really good. I have no regrets. I don't, I don't have any regrets about any of the relationships. I don't feel bad about loving deeply and passionately, because that's who I am, and and it was good at the time, like however it ends. So but that sort of went for 2.5 years, and it sort of like just finished as fast as it started.
Yeah.
It was just like over, and there was disloyalty action there too. So and I never lived with him. I had my young children. I was single mum.
Yeah.
Well, still am really. Not. I've just got my house back to myself, but you never stop being a mother. And I do have a partner now that I met 13 years ago on the internet.
Oh, wow.
And we dated briefly, but we didn't continue. Well, he pulled the plug after a couple of months because I wasn't ready for a relationship, and that's what he was looking for.
Yeah.
And then we got in contact 2 years after that, and we had another date, or a couple of dates, and he's got a really bad back, and he was pretty much said he was no good to me and pulled the plug again.
Oh, wow.
And then a couple of years after that, we reunited again, and we had a nice dinner. I've got health issues, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and I actually told him that I had been going through a bit of a rough patch, and then the next day after our dinner and motel, he just said, "Oh, you don't seem your same happy self," and I was just like, well, I didn't, I've got an illness.
Exactly.
I didn't focus on it too much. He understands chronic fatigue now, but he didn't at the time, and he pulled the plug again.
Oh my God.
So last year I went on a dating site to have a look, because you used to be able to have a look like without joining.
Yeah, that's right.
So they wanted me to join, but all I did was use the name I used before and gave my email address. So there was no picture, no write-up, nothing. I just thought I'd have a look. I think I spent all the 5 minutes on there and pulled the plug. And he must have seen that I was on there, and he rang me up. He's like, "It's Chris."
He wasn't learning his lesson. Like, obviously was still, you two were weren't finished. You were supposed to keep,
Yeah.
you had to be together, and yet he kept wanting to, I don't know,
That's
for
right.
whatever reason, run away, but it still wouldn't work for him.
Oh, that's right. And I'm not into making plans, as long as it's happening now and it's working now.
That's right.
I don't want to read too much into it or make plans for the future. Although you might get disappointed if you have expectations. So.
Yeah, and things always do change, even you change. So why plan for such a,
That's
anything too grand or, 20 years ahead? Just
right. He's married to his job and he lives over an hour away and sometimes works 7 days a week, so we don't have heaps of time together.
Yeah.
But we're definitely compatible and we are together.
Yeah.
And that's nice. It's nice to know that someone's there and I'm not getting too old and will be lonely.
That's right. Katie, what advice would you give your younger self, 20, 30 years, just sort of younger? What would you do differently, if anything?
Because I don't really have regrets or want to do anything differently, because that sort of makes me who I am today.
That's
right. Everyone can benefit from wise advice, but there's nothing I wouldn't do again, really.
Yeah.
So I can't think of anything I'd tell myself. Try not to worry too much about your kids, because it doesn't change anything.
That's a good one, anyway.
This is probably one of the hardest things to do, because I know that, but putting it into practice is the hard one.
So, Katie, everyone changes with age. What positive changes can you think of that's changed for you as you grew a bit older? Because you're still very young.
I'll probably just, I've never been judgmental, but just more tolerant of how people are and not letting it affect my life. Or, everyone has different opinions and different way of life, and you don't really know what they've been through, and just let people be who they are instead of judging them, or
That's right.
just tolerating people and not reacting to other people's opinions or thoughts or what they think of you or themselves. Trying to be calm and mature through it all, maybe.
Yeah.
Instead of reacting. I've never been one for conflict. I try and avoid it, which isn't always a good thing, but
I think it's wise, isn't it? Still, I even having experienced a few, conflicts myself, I think sometimes it is the best thing that you can do is just be tolerant, do your own thing, and not worry.
Well, it's a sort of waste of energy, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's got better things to do and looking more to the future. But, just not being negative about anything that happens, really. Taking it in your stride, especially if you don't have the power to change it.
That's right. That's the hardest
have
bit,
to
isn't
accept.
it? Yeah. Katie, what is the biggest challenge that you're experiencing at your current age?
So, for this moment in time in my life, it's letting go of my children and letting them be responsible for living their own life and making their own choices, whether they be good or bad. And not letting those choices affect me.
Yeah.
And so not wanting to control their life, really, which is, I don't try and control it, but every mother wants to put their 2 cents worth in.
That's right.
And you just have to let them learn, whether they struggle through life or breeze through it, it's their own making, Like I said, no one can rescue you from yourself except yourself. And
That's right.
sometimes sitting back and watching your children make choices that you don't think are favourable is hard to sit by and watch. And not want to control the situation, I suppose. So I'm still learning, and I'm getting there. I've had probably the worst year of my life with one of my children. and just learning to accept that that's her path and
not yours, and
I just have to. Well, I have. Or remove myself from the situation if it upsets me too much, and just let her be, and stumble through life the way she needs to.
Yeah.
To get where she wants to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, always be there for support. My biggest accomplishment is being true to myself and searching for or doing things that make me happy and content, and not worrying about anyone else, the past, future, and just focusing on me.
Yeah.
Being satisfied with life, really.
Katie, one more question. What advice would you give other women that will eventually get to this stage?
Well, pretty plain and simple, maybe, not to sacrifice your happiness for security.
Yeah.
Whether it be house, car, job, relationship. I think,
That's so true.
like being happy and content, or maybe not totally content, but happy is important. Like if you're not happy and you've got a big house and a car and a not very nice husband or partner, like what's the point?
That's right.
And I think there's too much, like especially in society today, like aimed at possessions and degrees or whatever.
That's right.
And everyone's so busy and distracted getting those, they're forgetting to live life and be happy.
That's right.
Like sometimes simple's best, I think.
So true. You do need to write a book, Katie. You need to write a book. Okay, keep your eyes closed. Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh,
it was very nice.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
If you have an interesting story to share, we'd love for you to participate. You can email us on info@alexandrawalker.com, and that's Alexandra spelled with a KS, or visit our website alexandrawalker.com.